Welcome back to the Think and Speak podcast, where language meets real life. Today's topic is one of the most powerful and misunderstood words in English: culture. Mr. Miller, why is culture such an important topic for English learners?
Because, Emma, language and culture are inseparable. When you learn how to talk about culture, you don't just improve your vocabulary. You improve your global awareness, your confidence, and your ability to connect with people from different backgrounds.
That's true. Many learners know grammar rules, but they struggle to express opinions about traditions, values, and social behavior.
Exactly. Today, we'll teach you modern expressions, useful phrases, and practical examples so you can speak naturally and intelligently about culture in conversations, exams, and professional settings.
If you want to sound fluent and culturally aware, this episode is for you.
Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment telling us what culture means in your country, and subscribe for more advanced English lessons.
Let's begin. Mr. Miller, when people hear the word culture, they often think only about food, clothing, or traditional festivals. However, in modern English conversations, especially in academic discussions, job interviews, and international communication, the concept of culture seems much broader and more complex. Could you explain what culture really means in today's globalized world? How can English learners talk about culture beyond stereotypes? And what kind of vocabulary or grammatical structures should they use to sound thoughtful and mature instead of simplistic? For example, instead of saying, "My culture is interesting," how can learners develop their ideas in a more analytical way? I believe many students struggle to organize their thoughts when discussing cultural values, social norms, and belief systems. So could you guide us step by step on how to define culture clearly, give relevant examples, and express personal opinions using advanced but practical English?
That's an excellent question, Emma. In modern English, the word culture goes far beyond food, fashion, and festivals. While those are visible elements of culture, they are only the surface. In academic terms, culture refers to the shared values, beliefs, behaviors, traditions, communication styles, and social norms of a group of people. First, learners should understand the difference between visible culture and invisible culture. Visible culture includes things we can easily observe: music, art, clothing, cuisine. Invisible culture includes attitudes toward authority, concepts of time, family structures, and ideas about success. For example, in some cultures punctuality is strictly valued, while in others flexibility with time is more common. Grammatically, when discussing culture, it is useful to use defining clauses and abstract nouns. For instance, culture is a system of shared values that shapes how people interpret the world. Here, the relative clause, that shapes how people interpret the world, adds depth and precision. Instead of saying, "My culture is interesting," learners can expand their ideas using complex sentences and linking devices. What makes my culture unique is its strong emphasis on community and collective responsibility. One of the defining characteristics of my culture is the respect shown toward elders. Notice the use of phrases like "what makes," one of the defining characteristics, and a strong emphasis on. These expressions sound analytical and mature. Another important grammar tool is the present simple for general truths. In my culture, family plays a central role in decision-making. People tend to prioritize group harmony over individual ambition. You can also use contrast connectors to avoid stereotypes. Although my country is often associated with traditional customs, younger generations are increasingly adopting global perspectives. In professional contexts, learners should use cautious language, also known as hedging. It seems that, in many cases, there is a tendency to, for example, there is a tendency to value academic achievement as a measure of success. To organize ideas clearly, I recommend a simple structure. Define culture. Explain key values. Provide examples. Offer a personal reflection. For instance, culture can be defined as the shared framework of values and behaviors within a society. In my country, hospitality is considered a fundamental virtue. Guests are often treated with exceptional generosity, which reflects the importance placed on social relationships. Personally, I believe this aspect of my culture fosters strong community bonds. This structure demonstrates clarity, coherence, and depth. Ultimately, speaking about culture in modern English requires critical thinking, precise vocabulary, and well-structured sentences. When learners move beyond surface descriptions and explore values, norms, and perspectives, their English becomes not only fluent, but intellectually engaging.
Mr. Miller, in today's interconnected world, we constantly interact with people from different cultural backgrounds, whether through social media, international workplaces, or global education. However, misunderstandings often occur because people interpret behavior through their own cultural lens. How can English learners discuss cultural differences respectfully without sounding judgmental or biased? What kind of sentence structures and vocabulary can help them compare cultures effectively? For example, if someone wants to talk about differences in communication styles, attitudes toward hierarchy, or concepts of personal space, how can they express these ideas diplomatically? Many learners are afraid of offending others when discussing cultural contrasts. Could you explain how to use comparative structures, modal verbs, and polite expressions to make their speech balanced, neutral, and professional?
That's a very relevant question, Emma. When discussing cultural differences, the key principle is neutrality. The goal is to compare, not to judge. First, learners should avoid absolute statements such as, "This culture is better." They are too direct. Instead, they can use comparative structures. Communication styles in my country tend to be more indirect compared to those in Northern Europe. The phrase, "tend to be," softens the statement. This is an example of hedging language, which makes speech more diplomatic. Another helpful grammar tool is the use of modal verbs for possibility. Misunderstandings may arise when expectations differ. People might interpret silence differently depending on cultural norms. Notice how may and might reduce certainty, which sounds more respectful. When comparing cultures, learners can use balanced sentence patterns. While some cultures value direct feedback, others place greater importance on preserving harmony. This contrast clause using while shows equality between the two sides. In professional contexts, phrases like the following are extremely useful. From my perspective, in my experience, it appears that there seems to be a difference in. For example, in my experience, workplace hierarchy appears to be more formal in some Asian countries, whereas flatter organizational structures are common in many Western companies. This sentence uses comparative adjectives, more formal, a contrast linker, whereas, and neutral vocabulary. Another strategy is to focus on description rather than evaluation. Instead of saying, "They are cold," say, "People tend to value personal space and privacy." Instead of, "They are aggressive communicators," say, "Communication tends to be more direct and explicit." By replacing emotional adjectives with descriptive ones, the tone becomes objective. Learners can also use cause and effect structures. Because punctuality is highly valued, meetings usually start exactly on time. As hierarchy plays a significant role, decisions are often made by senior management. These explanations prevent stereotypes because they provide context. Finally, a useful structure for balanced comparison is, both cultures share, however they differ in. Example, both cultures emphasize respect, however they differ in how respect is demonstrated. This sentence shows fairness and analytical thinking. In summary, to discuss cultural differences respectfully, learners should use hedging expressions, modal verbs, comparative structures, and neutral vocabulary. When language is balanced and precise, conversations about culture become opportunities for understanding rather than conflict.
Mr. Miller, culture is constantly evolving, especially in the digital age. Social media, global travel, remote work, and online education are changing how people think, communicate, and express identity. Some people argue that globalization is creating a global culture, while others believe local traditions are becoming stronger in response. How can English learners discuss cultural change and globalization in a sophisticated way? What advanced vocabulary and grammar structures can they use to explain trends, causes, and consequences? For example, if someone wants to talk about how technology influences language, fashion, or social values, how can they organize their ideas clearly and logically? Could you also explain how to use the present perfect, passive voice, and academic expressions when talking about cultural evolution?
Excellent question, Emma. When discussing cultural change, learners should focus on trends, processes, and impact. The present perfect tense is especially useful because it connects past changes to the present. Globalization has transformed the way people communicate. Social media has influenced cultural identity across generations. The structure has plus past participle, emphasizes ongoing change. Learners can also use the passive voice when the focus is on processes rather than people. Traditional customs have been adapted to modern lifestyles. English has been widely adopted as a global lingua franca. The passive voice sounds more academic and objective. To discuss causes and consequences, learners can use phrases like, "As a result of technological advancement, this shift has led to." One significant consequence is, for example, as a result of increased digital connectivity, cultural boundaries have become less rigid. Notice again the present perfect passive, have become. Advanced vocabulary is also essential. Instead of saying, "Culture is changing," say, "Cultural norms are evolving." Societies are undergoing rapid transformation. There has been a significant shift in social values. The phrase, "there has been," is a powerful academic structure. To organize ideas clearly, learners can follow this pattern. Introduce the trend. Explain the cause. Describe the impact. Offer a balanced evaluation. Example: in recent decades, there has been a noticeable shift toward digital communication. This trend has largely been driven by technological innovation and increased internet accessibility. As a consequence, younger generations have developed new forms of self-expression, particularly through social media platforms. While some argue that this leads to cultural homogenization, others believe it encourages creativity and cross-cultural dialogue. This paragraph includes present perfect, passive voice, cause-effect language, and balanced argumentation. Another advanced structure is the use of noun phrases to sound formal. The preservation of cultural heritage remains a priority. The expansion of global media has reshaped public discourse. In conclusion, when discussing cultural evolution, learners should combine advanced grammar, such as present perfect and passive voice, with academic vocabulary and logical organization. This approach allows them to speak confidently about one of the most important issues of our time: how culture adapts, survives, and transforms in a global society.
Mr. Miller, many English learners say they understand grammar and vocabulary, but when they try to speak about cultural identity, they suddenly feel stuck. Cultural identity seems personal, emotional, and sometimes even sensitive. How can learners talk about their own cultural identity confidently without sounding either too informal or overly dramatic? For instance, if someone wants to explain how their upbringing, traditions, language, or education shaped who they are today, what structure should they use? Also, how can they connect personal experience with broader cultural themes? I believe this is especially important for IELTS speaking exams, university interviews, or professional networking events where candidates are often asked about their background. Could you explain how to structure an answer about cultural identity clearly, using narrative tenses, reflective language, and precise vocabulary? And how can learners avoid generalizations while still expressing pride in their heritage in a balanced and thoughtful way?
That is a thoughtful question, Emma. Speaking about cultural identity requires both clarity and reflection. Learners should combine personal storytelling with analytical language. First, it is helpful to use narrative tenses when describing formative experiences. For example, I grew up in a multicultural environment where different traditions coexisted. When I was a child, my family would gather every weekend to celebrate traditional meals. Notice the use of the past simple, grew up, would gather, to describe repeated actions in the past. The structure, would plus base verb, is particularly useful for nostalgic or habitual memories. Then, learners should shift to the present perfect to connect past experiences with present identity. These experiences have shaped my perspective on community and belonging. My bilingual education has influenced the way I communicate. This tense highlights ongoing impact. To sound reflective rather than emotional, learners can use phrases like, "Looking back, I realize that, in retrospect, this background has enabled me to." For example, Looking back, I realized that growing up in a close-knit family instilled in me a strong sense of responsibility. The verb instilled is more precise than gave. Choosing specific verbs, such as shaped, influenced, reinforced, or broadened, elevates the language. To avoid generalizations, learners should replace broad claims with nuanced expressions. Instead of, "My culture is the best," say, "I take pride in the emphasis my culture places on mutual support and resilience." The phrase, "I take pride in," expresses confidence without sounding arrogant. It is also effective to connect personal experience to broader themes using linking expressions. On a broader level, this reflects a wider cultural value of. This is closely related to the concept of. Example: my parents encouraged open discussion at home. On a broader level, this reflects a cultural value of collective decision-making. For exams or interviews, a clear structure works best. Brief background. Specific example. Reflection on impact. Present relevance. Sample response. I was raised in a community that places great importance on education. As a child, I would often see my parents dedicating long hours to study and self-improvement. This environment fostered a deep respect for knowledge. As a result, I have developed a lifelong commitment to learning, which continues to guide my academic and professional choices. This answer moves smoothly from past to present and uses cause and effect connectors such as a result. In summary, discussing cultural identity confidently requires narrative tenses, reflective vocabulary, precise verbs, and logical organization. When learners combine personal stories with thoughtful analysis, they sound authentic, articulate, and mature.
Mr. Miller, in modern society, many people experience cultural adaptation, whether by studying abroad, working in international companies, or moving to a new country. Adjusting to a different cultural environment can be both exciting and challenging. How can English learners talk about culture shock, adaptation, and integration in a structured and academic way? What vocabulary can help them describe emotional reactions, behavioral changes, and personal growth? For example, how can they explain the stages of adaptation or compare their expectations with reality? Could you also demonstrate how to use conditional sentences, gerunds, and formal expressions when discussing these experiences? I believe this topic is extremely relevant in today's globalized world, and learners need practical tools to express both difficulties and achievements clearly and professionally.